The story of humanity often feels like one of triumph. We look around today and see a world bent to our will, skyscrapers piercing the clouds, ships sailing every ocean, machines that make the planet seem small and tame. To us, it feels inevitable that humans became the masters of Earth. But if you step back in time, not thousands of years, but tens of thousands, the picture becomes startlingly different. For much of our existence, we were not lords of the wilderness. We were fragile, vulnerable, and hunted. Hello there, and welcome to BoneAge. My name is Thomas. Tonight, we'll be walking into a forgotten world, one that may keep your imagination awake long after the fire burns low. Imagine yourself standing barefoot on the edge of a darkened steppe at the close of the Ice Age. The air is sharp with frost, your breath pooling white in front of you. The grass moves in waves, not from the wind, but from something larger moving within it. A shadow circles the tree line bigger than any predator alive today, silent but inevitable. You do not stand as its equal, you stand as its prey. We like to think of humanity's ancient story as a slow march upward, fire, stone tools, hunting, and at last, mastery of the beasts. But perhaps that is only the ending. For most of the tale, the roles were reversed. There were lions larger than any alive today, their jaws capable of closing around a human skull in a single bite. Saber-toothed cats whose fangs glinted like ivory daggers, built for ambush. Hyenas that outweighed wolves, clever enough to overwhelm us in packs. Bears that stood taller than mammoths. And in distant lands, birds as tall as men with beaks sharp enough to split bone. What if the Ice Age was not humanity's great victory, but a long era when monsters reigned over us? When every step into the grasslands, every night spent in a cave, was a negotiation with creatures stronger, faster, and hungrier than we could ever be. This isn't a tale of heroes and villains, but of survival in the margins, not a debate, but an exploration. How close we came to never leaving the shadows at all. And to begin, we have to picture the world as it truly was, a stage already crowded with giants, into which humanity arrived as the smallest of players. Step softly now, into a landscape that feels both familiar and alien. The wind that brushes against your face is the same wind we feel today, sharp with dust, carrying the scent of grass and distant water. But the ground beneath your feet trembles with a different kind of life, heavier, more powerful, and impossibly vast. This was Earth between 2 million and 10,000 years ago, a stage where humans were not the actors in command, but background figures in a play already dominated by giants. When we think of lions today, we imagine the tawny shapes of the African savanna, powerful hunters in their own right. Yet those lions were but shadows compared to the cave. Lion Panthera leospelaia, a predator larger than any lion alive now. Their bodies stretched nearly 4 meters in length, with shoulders higher than a man's chest, built not just for power, but for endurance. Imagine the sight of one standing at the mouth of a cave, its maneless body glistening in the firelight, its yellow eyes reflecting back the terror of a clan huddled inside. And they were not alone. The Ice Age was an age of cats, and among them walked creatures that seemed torn from myth. Saber-toothed cats like Smilodon fatalis and its cousin Homotherium ruled the shadows. With canines as long as a man's hand, they were specialists in the art of killing, designed to pierce deep into muscle and artery, ending life in seconds. Fossil evidence shows that they struck down prey with bone-crushing force, targeting the softest places where no armor of fur or hide could save you. To early humans, they must have seemed like demons of flesh, silent, precise, and endlessly patient. But the cats were not the only hunters. Imagine a hyena, not the laughing scavenger we know today, but a creature heavier than a wolf, with jaws strong enough to splinter the bones of mammoths. The giant hyena, Pachycrocuta brevirostris, stalked Europe and Asia in packs, each animal weighing over 200 pounds. Where one came, more followed, their ranks enough to scatter entire families of humans from a kill site, leaving us hungry and defeated. These hyenas did not merely wait for scraps, they hunted, they killed, and they displaced. In their presence, humanity was always the lesser power. And then there were the bears. Not the brown bears of modern forests, not even the mighty grizzlies. These were short-faced bears, Arctodus simus, towering up to 12 feet when rearing, with legs built for speed that rivaled a galloping horse. They were apexes of terror, capable of covering open ground faster than any human could ever hope to run. For a solitary figure on the steppe, there would be no escape. Against such a beast, strength, cunning, and even fire might fail. Cross to another continent, and the story only deepens. In South America, vast plains echoed with the footsteps of creatures that seem almost too strange to believe. Terror birds, Forus racidae, rose 10 feet tall, their beaks like sharpened axes capable of shattering bone. They were flightless but swift, with legs designed for sudden, deadly pursuit. Imagine cresting a hill to see one standing there, feathers bristling, eyes fixed upon you. No negotiation, no hesitation. To step into their territory was to step into certain death. The world of giants did not wait for us. It was already here when our ancestors emerged, already balanced in ecosystems where predators held dominion. We were newcomers stepping timidly into their kingdoms, intruders into an order we had no claim to challenge. For millions of years before us, these monsters had ruled unchecked lions in caves, hyenas in packs, bears across the plains, birds on the edge of jungles. When humans arrived, we did so quietly, shadows in their shadows, fragile bodies trying to exist in the margins. Consider for a moment the simple act of gathering food. Today, you might imagine bending to pick berries or sharpening a stone to cut meat. In that ancient world, such acts were fraught with peril. Every bend of the back could expose you to watching eyes. Every footprint pressed into mud could be read by a predator. Hunting meant risk, but so too did scavenging. Even fire, our great tool, could betray us, drawing predators to the glow, eager to test the courage of the strange new primates daring to sit in its warmth. And yet, humanity endured, not as kings, not yet, but as survivors who learned to move in a land not meant for them. Picture a clan pressed into the walls of a limestone cave, listening to the growl of lions outside. The air smells of smoke and sweat. Children cling to their mothers. Elders whisper caution. The fire flickers, casting jagged shadows across the stone, but even its light cannot dispel the presence beyond. Hours pass like centuries, every heartbeat a drum of fear. Perhaps dawn will drive the lions away, perhaps not. In this world, survival was never certain. The giants were not myths. They were flesh, blood, and bone, and their remains are written into the earth's record. We have uncovered skulls of cave lions larger than any modern predator, hyena dens filled with human bones, saber-tooth fossils etched with signs of ancient combat. Archaeology does not need to imagine them, it confirms their dominion. But to understand what it meant for us, you have to feel it. To stand barefoot on the edge of that world, knowing that your family, your children, your very species were not the hunters but the hunted, and maybe that is where our story truly begins, not with conquest, but with humility, with the knowledge that our ancestors lived in a world not made for them, a world already ruled by creatures stronger, faster, and more ferocious than anything we can comprehend today. We were small, but we endured. We were weak, but we adapted. And step by step, fire by fire, stone by stone, we began to carve out a place among monsters. But to see how fragile that place was, we need to look deeper at what role we truly played in this food chain, and whether we were hunters at all, or merely the hunted. Picture the savannah not as a golden land of opportunity, but as a hunting ground where every sound might mark your end. The grasses are tall, taller than your shoulders, whispering in the wind. You crouch low, not because you are stalking prey, but because you are avoiding eyes sharper and faster than your own. This was the reality for early humans. Survival not as apex hunters, but as one of the many vulnerable species scattered across the plains. Modern memory places us confidently at the top of the food chain, yet the fossil record paints another story. Bones of early hominins, from Australopithecus to Homo erectus, bear the puncture marks of fangs and the scoring scratches of claws. Archaeologists have uncovered caves where human remains lie jumbled among gnawed bones of deer and horses, all dragged there by lions or hyenas. We were part of the menu. Imagine the eyes of a saber-tooth glinting in the twilight, focused not on bison or deer, but on a straggling human child. To predators, we were easy prey. We lacked thick hides, had no horns or claws, no speed to outrun, no wings to escape. Our strength lay not in our bodies, but in what we had not yet perfected. Our tools, our cooperation, our fire. Before these came fully into being, we were soft flesh in a land of sharpened teeth. Some anthropologists suggest that the very shape of our lives was sculpted by this vulnerability. To sleep on the open ground was to court death, and so we clung to caves, trees, and cliffsides. To move alone was to vanish, and so we banded together, watching the horizon with many eyes. To forage was to risk an ambush, and so our instincts sharpened toward caution, the quick jolt of fear at a rustle in the grass, the prickling of the neck when unseen eyes follow us. These reflexes, still alive in us today, were not born from power, but from weakness. Even the weapons we carved in stone speak of a species struggling to climb from the bottom. The earliest tools were not spears for hunting mammoths, but sharp flakes used to crack bones left behind by other predators. Hyenas and lions killed, and we scavenged. We waited until their bellies were full, until the danger had passed, and then crept in to steal what marrow was left. Survival was measured not in triumphs, but in what scraps we could safely claim. Consider the archaeological site of Swartkrans in South Africa, where hominin fossils have been found inside leopard caves. Their skulls bear puncture marks that align perfectly with feline fangs. These were not hunters who fell in battle. They were victims dragged into darkness, consumed in silence. To predators, our ancestors were not special. They were one more meal among many. But perhaps it was this very condition, this life lived under constant threat, that sharpened what we now call humanity. Fear forced vigilance. Weakness demanded strategy. Prey cannot afford mistakes, and so every step, every breath, every decision had weight. Imagine lying awake at night, the stars overhead brilliant and cold, your ears straining for the pad of feet in the grass. That pressure shaped our ancestors' minds as much as their bones. Speculation flows naturally from this truth. What if the reason our eyes are forward-facing, with depth perception tuned for detail, is not because we hunted, but because we had to spot danger before it closed in? What if our habit of telling stories by firelight began not as entertainment, but as warnings passed from elder to child about what prowled in the dark? What if our very anxiety, the restlessness that grips us when silence grows too deep, is the echo of lives spent waiting for predators to emerge from the shadows? The evidence is sobering. Studies of modern primates provide clues. Baboons, chimpanzees, and gorillas live in constant negotiation with predators. They huddle together, place guards at the edges, move as troops rather than loners. Early humans, smaller and weaker, must have done the same. It was not courage that kept them alive, but numbers, vigilance, and the ability to run when danger came too close. And yet, there were moments of defiance. We know from sites where cut marks overlap, predator tooth marks, that sometimes our ancestors arrived not after the hunt, but during it. Perhaps they startled lions from a kill with shouts and thrown stones, risking their lives for a chance at meat. Perhaps they crept close with firebrands, the flicker of flame buying them a few stolen minutes before the beasts returned. Such acts were not victories in the way we imagine hunting today. They were desperate gambles, small rebellions in a world where we were not expected to last. Think of the population bottleneck revealed by genetic studies, a time when fewer than 500 humans remained alive on the entire planet. For over 100,000 years, our species hovered on the brink of extinction. Climate was cruel, food scarce, and predators many. To exist at all was a defiance of odds so overwhelming that most species in that position vanish forever. The fact that we are here, breathing, dreaming, and remembering, is testimony not to dominance but to endurance. When you walk in the dark today and feel unease, when your heart quickens at a sudden sound in the brush, you are not simply anxious. You are remembering. Your blood carries echoes of nights when silence was broken by the growl of lions, when footsteps in the grass meant death. The prey still lives within us. But what if being prey was not only a curse, but the beginning of our gift? To be hunted is to learn, to be vulnerable is to adapt. Every scar left on ancient bones, every set of teeth that found its mark, may have taught us something: caution, cooperation, ingenuity. Prey species survive not by overpowering, but by outlasting, and that is what we did. So before humanity could ever imagine conquering the world, it first had to survive its place at the bottom of the chain. And perhaps, without that long apprenticeship in fear, we would never have risen at all. But if this is true, then to understand how fragile our beginnings were, we must turn to one of the greatest empires of predators, creatures whose dominion forced us into the very caves we later claimed as homes. Step into Ice Age Europe, where shadows move larger than memory, and the cold wind carries scents that speak of death and dominion. In this land, one creature reigned above all others, the cave lion. Known to science as Panthera leospelea, these were not the lions of today's plains. They were giants, stretching nearly 4 meters in length, towering above modern lions in size, their muscles coiled with power honed for open-steppe hunts. To walk across Europe or Asia, then, was to walk in their kingdom. We imagine caves as humanity's first homes, sanctuaries against the storm. But the evidence whispers a different story. Fossil remains show that many caves were first occupied by lions, not people. Their bones lie in the same chambers we once thought of as human hearths, sometimes claw marks etched into the stone itself, as if the walls remembered their passing. When humans later entered these places, they were not claiming them, they were intruding. Each cave was a fortress already held, and to step inside was to challenge the lion's throne. Imagine the scene. A group of early humans approaches the dark mouth of a cavern at dusk, seeking shelter from a coming storm. The air grows heavy, the light fading fast. But inside, eyes already gleam golden, unblinking, patient. A low rumble carries through the stone, a voice of warning older than fire. The clan hesitates. Do they risk the storm outside, or the monsters within? Shelter was never guaranteed. It was stolen, contested, fought for. Perhaps fire was our one answer, the fragile flame that turned the balance, even if only briefly. There are cave sites where lion bones bear cut marks, scars of encounters where humans dared strike back. But for every tale of defiance, there must have been countless nights of retreat, where the lion's rule was absolute and humanity's survival meant turning away, finding some lesser refuge beneath the stars. In art, too, their empire lingers. Across Europe, in Chauvet Cave and beyond, lions are etched into stone by human hands that trembled in awe. These images were not trophies of conquest, but acknowledgements of power. whole panels devoted to prides of lions, their bodies stretched in motion, their eyes fixed upon something unseen. No human figure beside them, no triumph, only reverence. The drawings suggest not ownership, but recognition of a sovereignty that humans could not challenge. And so, the cave lion's empire was not built of cities or walls, but of fear itself. They ruled not because they needed to, but because their presence demanded it. We, the fragile newcomers, learned quickly that caves were never empty. They had to be taken, defended, sometimes abandoned. In their reign, we see the shape of our early struggle, a contest not for dominance, but for the right simply to exist in the same space. The cave was never ours to begin with. It was a fortress, built not by stone and mortar, but by darkness itself, a place where predators had long since drawn their borders. For early humans, entering such a place was less an act of settling than one of siege. We did not inherit the caves, we stole them, and the weapon that made this theft possible was not muscle, nor fang, but fire. Imagine the flicker of flame against rough limestone walls, its shadows leaping like spirits, its smoke curling into the hidden recesses of the cavern. To us, fire was warmth, safety, light, but to lions, to hyenas, to the countless beasts who had ruled the caves before us, it was something alien, a burning star born on earth. With it, humans drew a line between themselves and the night. A fragile line, but a line nonetheless. Archaeology offers fragments of this story. Charred bones, blackened hearths, soot-stained ceilings reaching back nearly 1,000,000 years. At sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, evidence suggests that hominins tended controlled fires as early as 1,000,000 years ago. These were not accidents of lightning or wild infernos, they were deliberate, sustained. Fire became not just a tool, but a strategy, and in this strategy, we see humanity's first rebellion against the monsters that surrounded them. Picture a night when lions gather outside, their low growls vibrating through the stone. The humans inside huddle close to the flames, the firelight dancing on their faces. Each spark is a shield, each ember a promise that the dark will not close in fully. The lions prowl, their eyes glimmering in the black, waiting for weakness, for the fire to sputter. It is a standoff, silent but absolute. Whoever holds the flame holds the ground. But this was no simple victory. Fire was fragile. It demanded fuel, vigilance, and care. A hearth left untended could die in the night, leaving a clan exposed. Perhaps that is why early humans carried embers with them on migrations, glowing seeds wrapped in ash, tended like treasure. Fire was not simply created anew, it was preserved, protected, passed from hand to hand like the very essence of survival. In the rhythm of feeding flames, of gathering wood, of keeping watch, humanity wove its first communal ritual. To lose fire was to risk death. To keep it alive was to remain human. Speculation tells us that caves may have been less like homes and more like war zones. Each entry into one was a contest, smoke pushed deep into the recesses to drive out occupants. Shouting and firebrands raised high to force lions from their lairs. In some cases, perhaps the effort failed, and humans retreated, their torches swallowed by the roar of beasts unwilling to yield. To call a cave home was therefore not a claim of peace, but a declaration of conquest. Even art reflects this uneasy relationship. In Chauvet Cave, lions are painted with reverence, their forms powerful, untamed, but alongside them, human fire once burned, blackening the walls with soot. The juxtaposition tells a story. The cave belonged to both predator and prey, locked in an uneasy stalemate. The lions left their bones, humans left their ash. Two empires colliding in stone chambers lit by flame. Perhaps it was in these battles for firelight that humanity began to discover itself. Sitting together around a single blaze, watching shadows dance, our ancestors shared more than warmth. They shared stories, warnings, ideas. Fire extended the day, carving out hours for reflection and planning. In its glow, survival ceased to be instinct alone. It became thought, strategy, imagination. The flame was a shield, but it was also a teacher. And yet, even with fire, victory was not assured. Predators tested its limits. A gust of wind could scatter embers, rain could drown a blaze, hunger could drive beasts to brave the heat. Humans were not invincible behind the flames, they were simply granted a reprieve. For every night the fire held, there must have been another when the balance tipped back, when lions lunged despite the crackle of sparks, when screams echoed against stone, leaving only silence and smoke. But over generations, the lesson took hold. Fire was not merely survival, it was defiance. It was the first true weapon in a war that would last millennia. And as humans carried it deeper into caves, onto plains, across continents, they carved out a claim no predator could fully erase. Consider this: without fire, would we have survived at all? The bottleneck of our species, that fragile moment when fewer than 2,000 humans remained alive on Earth, may have been endured only because of this fragile alliance with flame. It cooked our food, unlocking nutrients that fueled our brains. It warded off the night stalkers who would have erased us. It gave us the courage to step into caves, into forests, into futures we could not yet imagine. And so the battle for firelight was never truly won. It was fought night after night, spark after spark, in a world where darkness itself was an enemy, and every cave a contested fortress. Fire did not make us masters yet, but it gave us something we had never possessed before, a foothold, however small, in a world of giants. Step away from the flicker of firelight and into the deep grasslands where silence rules. Here, another predator moved, not with the steady rhythm of a lion's prowl, but with the silence of a shadow preparing to strike. The saber-toothed cats, Smilodon in the Americas, Homotherium across Europe, Asia, and Africa, were nightmares sculpted in flesh and bone. For early humans, they were not beasts of myth. They were the living embodiment of death waiting in the grass. Unlike modern lions or leopards, saber-toothed cats were ambush hunters of terrifying precision. Their bodies were heavy, muscular, built less for endurance chases and more for sudden violence. Fossils reveal forelimbs thick as tree branches, shoulders built like coiled springs. And then there were the teeth-curved canines as long as a man's hand, fragile against bone yet perfect for piercing through flesh into arteries and windpipes. A single strike could silence prey before a scream could even leave its lips. Evidence shows this killing strategy left its mark not only on prey but on predators themselves. Many fossilized skulls of Smilodon bear fractures, broken canines, jaws dislocated in the act of attack. Their method was high risk, high reward. They relied on precision, and in the chaos of a struggle, injury was inevitable. Yet despite these dangers, they endured for nearly 2 million years, an empire of shadows across continents. For humans, the terror they inspired is almost beyond imagining. Picture walking across an Ice Age savanna at dusk. The air is cool, the grass sways softly, and there is no sound but the chirp of insects. Yet the silence is wrong. A stillness presses on you, prickling your skin. Somewhere in that grass, eyes watch. You cannot see them, you cannot hear them, but they are there, and when they move, it will already be too late. Perhaps this is where our instinctive fear of the unseen was born. The dread of glowing eyes in the dark, of sudden movements at the edge of vision. The saber-tooth was the perfect architect of such fears. Unlike a lion, it did not roar before it killed. Unlike a wolf, it did not chase in packs across open ground. It waited, utterly still, until the moment to strike was perfect. To our ancestors, it must have seemed less like an animal and more like a demon in flesh, a force that emerged from nothingness and vanished just as quickly, leaving only silence and blood behind. Archaeology strengthens this vision. At sites across the Americas, bones of Smilodon are found with cut marks alongside prey remains, suggesting humans and saber-tooths often competed for the same kills. Imagine what that meant in practice. A group of early humans gathering around a fallen bison, cutting meat with stone flakes, only to see the grass shift nearby, the air grow heavy, and the terrible form of a saber-tooth emerging. Fire may have helped in caves, but out here, on open plains, the contest was far less certain. Speculation invites us deeper. Could the myths of fanged demons, passed down across cultures, echo the memory of saber-toothed cats? Stories of vampires that drain life with a bite, of monsters that strike suddenly in the night, may find their roots not in imagination but in memory, the long genetic shadow of predators who once struck us down with bone-crushing jaws. What we now tell as legends may be echoes of screams from the grasslands, refracted through time into myth. Consider, too, the physical toll. Fossils of early hominins show fractures, dismemberment, even partial skeletons with marks suggesting large predators consumed them. In South America, where Smilodon populator reigned as one of the largest cats ever to walk the earth, humans entering these lands faced an apex predator unlike anything alive today. We often speak of colonizing new continents, of bold migrations. But in truth, each migration was a gamble into another monster's empire. Each step forward weighed against the shadows that already ruled the land. Perhaps the saber-tooths taught us more than fear. Perhaps they taught us patience. To survive in their presence, one had to read the land as finely as they did, to listen to silence, to sense movement where none should be, to remain vigilant even in stillness. These were not lessons of the hunter, but of the hunted. Yet over time, they became the roots of strategy, of cooperation, of foresight. In avoiding predators, we learned how to become them, but the shadow of saber-tooths lingered long after they were gone. When you feel unease walking alone in tall grass, when you glance twice at a patch of darkness that seems too quiet, you are reliving the memory of ancestors who walked under their gaze. The fear is not irrational, it is inherited. It is survival echoing across 100,000 generations. And so the saber-toothed cats, though gone, remain with us still. They are the darkness in our myths, the gleam in the stories of beasts that stalk the night, the reason firelight has always felt like sanctuary. For to humans of the Ice Age, the saber-tooth was not an animal. It was a shadow that could kill. The night has always belonged to others. Long before cities spilled their light across the sky, before torches lined roads and lamps glowed in windows, the darkness was a living kingdom, and in that kingdom, we were trespassers. To sit in silence beneath a star-cluttered sky was to feel the weight of unseen eyes, to know that somewhere just beyond the reach of vision, teeth waited. This fear was not imagined, it was earned. Our ancestors lived through nights when glowing eyes stared back from the tree line, when heavy paws pressed against the soil just outside the fire's glow. The saber-toothed Smilodon in the Americas, Homotherium across Europe and Asia, carved their dominion not only into bone, but into memory. Even after they vanished, their shadows lingered in the stories we told. Think of the myths scattered across cultures, stories whispered at the edge of firelight. Vampires with elongated fangs draining the lifeblood of the living. Demons that stalk in silence, their eyes glowing red in the dark. Spirits that wait in forests to strike down the unwary. Could these not be echoes of saber-tooth encounters, retold and reshaped as centuries passed? The pattern is too familiar. Sudden attack, the wound to the throat, the life extinguished in a single bite. What we now call folklore may be nothing more than prehistory surviving in disguise. Archaeology offers hints of this connection. At predator dens across Europe, the bones of humans have been found alongside the remains of mammoths and bison. Some bear the unmistakable puncture of saber-toothed canines, the marks of a strike so precise it left little doubt about the manner of death. To live near these predators was not to live in safety, but in constant negotiation with fear, and fear is the seed of story. Speculation suggests that the very act of storytelling by firelight may have grown from these encounters. When a child asked, "What waits beyond the dark?" the answer was never simple. It was clothed in metaphor, in monsters. The stories were not merely entertainment, they were warnings, survival guides wrapped in fear. If you lingered too long away from the fire, the glowing eyes would find you. If you wandered into the woods alone, the fanged demon would strike. These were not lies, but translations of truth into memory. Imagine a clan gathered at night, the flames crackling low, shadows dancing across stone walls. An elder speaks softly, voice low, shaping words into caution. The children listen, wide-eyed, imagining beasts with fangs like daggers, eyes like coals. The story lives longer than the moment. It becomes lesson, it becomes culture, it becomes myth. And so the saber-tooths, though gone, survive in the very fabric of human imagination. Even our biology carries their trace. Night vision in humans is weak, but our sensitivity to eyeshine remains. We detect reflected light in ways that seem almost unnecessary in a modern world, but essential in one where predators watched from the dark. Our fear of glowing eyes, a primal shiver when headlights catch an animal on a roadside. When a cat's gaze gleams in the shadows, is perhaps a ghost of those nights when saber-tooths watched us from beyond the fire. And consider the places where these predators once thrived. In Europe, Homotherium roamed from open plains to forest edges. Their skeletal remains suggest a cat built for endurance, for persistence, hunting in groups, perhaps driving prey into ambushes. In the Americas, Smilodon crouched in the grasslands, striking down bison and camels with crushing force. For humans, each region carried its own myth, shaped by the predators who ruled it. The demon in the forest, the beast in the grass, the shadow in the cave. Each story different, each story the same. What if, then, the monsters we imagine have never been inventions at all, but memories dressed in new skin? Dragons with jaws lined in teeth, demons with claws, werewolves that strike from the shadows, all of them could be distorted reflections of predators we once knew. The myths endured because the fear endured. They spoke to something real, something lived. Perhaps this explains why stories of fanged creatures are universal. Cultures separated by oceans, by centuries, still share tales of blood drinkers, of glowing eyes, of predators who hunt by night. They were not borrowing from each other, they were remembering together. The memory was carved into our very being, and so it surfaced wherever humans gathered to tell stories. And so, in the end, the saber-tooths may have given us more than fear. They may have given us myth itself, the first shared language of imagination, the first attempt to give shape to what lurked just beyond sight. In fighting to explain them, to warn of them, to remember them, we laid the foundation of narrative. Our culture, our stories, our art, all may have begun as survival strategies against the monsters in the dark. Even now, when the forests are quiet and no predator waits at the edge of firelight, we still tell their stories. We cannot let them go. They live in the shapes of nightmares, in the rhythm of horror tales, in the unease that fills us when shadows grow too deep. The saber-tooth is gone, but the monster in the dark remains. Step out from the forest's edge and onto the windswept plains of Ice Age Eurasia, and you would find yet another empire of predators waiting. Not solitary hunters this time, nor silent shadows with daggered teeth, but packs loud, relentless, unyielding. Here ruled the giant hyenas, Pachycrocuta brevirostris, creatures larger than modern wolves, with jaws built to crack through bone as though it were bark. These were not the spotted hyenas we know today, scavengers of the African savanna with their eerie, laughing cries. No, these were kings of another kind, heavier, more brutal, weighing close to 200 pounds each, with skulls that could splinter the femur of a bison. Where lions inspired awe and saber-tooth's terror, the giant hyenas inspired something else, despair, for they were not just predators, they were usurpers. Evidence shows that these hyenas did more than compete with humans for kills, they competed for shelter. Fossil dens reveal layers of bones dragged deep into caves, not only of deer and horses, but of humans. Gnawed skulls, broken femora, marrow sucked dry. Archaeologists studying these dens have concluded what our ancestors must have known too well. Caves were not ours alone. They were claimed again and again by hyena packs, who drove out rivals and feasted on the remains of those who resisted. Imagine the sound of it. A cold night on the steppes, wind howling across open ground. From the distance the cries begin, not laughter as we know it, but a chorus of calls rising together, carrying across the dark. You huddle closer to the fire, but the sound grows louder, closer, until the darkness beyond seems to shimmer with movement. Dozens of shapes appear, yellow eyes flashing, bodies weaving as one. You are not facing a single beast, but an army. Hyenas were not solitary hunters. They overwhelmed with numbers, surrounding their prey, attacking from all sides. Against such tactics, even fire might falter. A pack could circle for hours, testing the edges of flame, waiting for the wood to dwindle, for the humans to grow weary. To be faced with lions or saber-tooths was to fear a single strike. To be faced with hyenas was to dread attrition, the grinding inevitability of being outnumbered. Speculation suggests that entire human groups may have been erased in such encounters. A single pack, dozens strong, descending on a shelter in the night could annihilate every member of a clan before dawn. The traces left behind, scattered bones, gnawed and cracked, are silent testimonies to these massacres. To call them predator attacks does not capture the scale. These were battles for survival, often lost. And yet, perhaps hyenas shaped us in ways more profound than claws or fangs ever could. To fight a saber-tooth was to face one enemy. To fight hyenas was to face a collective. In them, humans may have learned the first lessons of cooperation, not merely to defend themselves, but to mirror the tactics of the pack. To survive the hyena kings, we had to become something like them, bound together, moving as one, stronger as a group than as individuals. It is telling that across cultures, the hyena remains a symbol of treachery, of theft, of danger in the night. Even today, their reputation carries unease far beyond their modern reality. Could it be that this cultural disdain is rooted in memories older than language? Memories of nights when the fire dimmed and the packs came, when caves were lost, when survival meant retreat. The echo of the hyena's cry still chills us, not because of what they are now, but because of what they once were. In the empire of the hyena kings, humans were intruders, their shelters fragile, their numbers few. We survived not because we conquered, but because we endured, because we learned. But each night under their rule was another reminder that the path to dominance was still far beyond reach. The world belonged not to us, but to the beasts who prowled its darkened edges. Picture a hunt on the Ice Age plains. Hours of tracking across frozen earth, the wind biting against your face, the scent of blood growing stronger as you close in. At last, the prey falls a reindeer, struck by stones, spears, or perhaps driven into a trap. The clan gathers, hearts racing, the promise of meat brightening tired eyes. Knives of flint begin their work, carving muscle from bone, marrow waiting to be split. But before the first portion can be carried away, the sound arrives, a chorus on the wind, sharp and mocking, hyenas. This was the cruel rhythm of life under their watch: to hunt but not to eat, to fight but not to win. Archaeological evidence shows that hyenas were master thieves of survival, their jaws not only shaping bones but shaping the fate of other species. Many sites across Europe and Asia show patterns of cut marks from human tools overlaid by gnaw marks from hyena teeth, or the reverse proof of a grim cycle. Humans claimed the kill. Hyenas arrived, overwhelming them with numbers, seizing the carcass and leaving behind scraps. In this way, our ancestors were not merely prey to hyenas, they were rivals, and in rivalry they often lost. Unlike lions, who killed to feed themselves, hyenas took what was already won. They waited for others to do the work, then descended with bone-crushing force, scattering families, forcing humans to retreat with nothing but hunger in their bellies. Survival was never secure. It could be stolen in a moment. Imagine the despair of it. A clan weak from hunger finally bringing down a horse after days of pursuit, only to hear the cries of a pack sweeping in. Dozens of yellow eyes surrounding them, the smell of carrion thick in the air, the kill dragged away while children cried in emptiness. To live beneath the rule of hyenas was to live with the knowledge that even your greatest effort could be erased in minutes. Hunger was not only a condition of the land, it was imposed by the teeth of others. Speculation suggests that this relentless theft left scars on more than bone. It shaped memory, story, and even strategy. The idea of tricksters in myth, of cunning thieves who take what others have earned, may trace its lineage to these encounters. Hyenas, more than any predator, embodied theft itself, not only killers but usurpers. In many African and Eurasian traditions, the hyena is still seen as dishonest, unclean, a creature that feeds off the labor of others. Could this reputation be a cultural fossil, a remnant of nights when our ancestors starved because of them? But theft also teaches resilience. To face hyenas meant learning to protect not just lives, but labor. Firelight was one defense, but so too were tactics surrounding kills, posting guards, carrying portions away quickly before the pack could descend. Perhaps even our first weapons, designed for throwing rather than stabbing, were forged from this rivalry. Stones and spears hurled not at prey, but at encroaching hyenas. In this way, the thieves of survival may have pushed us toward the art of defense, of foresight, of protecting what we had earned. Consider also the ecological balance. Hyenas were efficient recyclers of life, breaking bones, consuming marrow, leaving little behind. To them, our kills were no different than a deer's or a horse's. We were just another species to exploit. Yet for us, each lost carcass meant more than calories. It meant time stolen, energy wasted, risk endured for nothing. In the brutal calculus of Ice Age existence, such theft was devastating. Starvation was never far away, and a single lost hunt could mean death for the weakest in the clan. And yet, perhaps it is here that the seeds of persistence were planted. If lions ruled with fear and saber-tooths with silence, hyenas ruled with inevitability. And to face inevitability is to learn endurance. Again and again, humans returned to the hunt, knowing it might be stolen. Again and again they lit fires, guarded carcasses, and carved what they could before the thieves arrived. The persistence itself became a weapon, a refusal to vanish despite the losses. There is poetry in the thought that humanity's stubbornness, our refusal to give up, may have been sharpened in these moments. To endure theft is to learn patience. To endure hunger is to learn perseverance. To endure loss is to learn that tomorrow must still be faced. The hyena kings did not intend to shape us, but in taking from us, they forced us to grow. Even today, echoes remain. Our deep distrust of opportunistic thieves, Our suspicion of those who take without labor may reflect instincts born on the steppe. Our fear of laughter in the night, of mocking sounds carried on the wind, may recall the hyena's chorus. The thieves of survival are gone, but their shadows linger in culture, in instinct, in memory. And so, humanity starved beneath their dominance. But in that starvation, we learned. We were tested not only in strength, but in spirit. And though we lost many battles, we carried forward the lesson that survival was never guaranteed, but always worth the fight. Across the vast grasslands of Ice Age North America, there walked a shadow that dwarfed nearly every predator before or since. It was not a lion, nor a saber-tooth, nor even the packs of hyenas that haunted Eurasia. It was a bear, but no ordinary bear. Arctodus simus, the short-faced bear, stood as one of the largest mammalian predators ever to stalk the earth. And for early humans who ventured into its range, this beast was not merely an obstacle, it was terror incarnate. Imagine a creature rising more than 12 feet tall when rearing, its muzzle short and blunt, its legs long and built for speed. Unlike the lumbering image we often assign to bears today, Arctodus was a pursuit predator. Its limbs suggest a stride that could cover ground like a galloping horse, capable of reaching prey not by ambush, but by endurance. For humans, slow, fragile, bound to fire and tool, there was no chance of outrunning it. To see one on the horizon was to feel inevitability itself drawing near. Archaeological evidence paints a grim picture. Fossilized remains show a predator weighing up to 600 pounds, its skull built for crushing, its jaws capable of applying pressure strong enough to splinter bones like kindling. It is easy to imagine mammoths or bison falling victim to such power, but humans, we would not have even been a challenge. One swipe of its claws could shatter ribs. One bite could end life in an instant. No human, no matter how brave or prepared, could stand against it alone. Consider the scene of a small human band trekking across the plains, carrying bundles of gathered food, children strapped to their mothers' backs. The air is cool, the grass bends in waves, and in the distance, a form rises, taller than any man, faster than any runner. The short-faced bear closes ground in silence, its breath steaming in the air, its eyes fixed on the intruders. What could humans do but scatter? And scattering only sealed their fate. Against such a predator, unity offered little safety. Speculation suggests that the very geography of human migration may have been shaped by these beasts. Perhaps certain valleys and plains were avoided entirely, not because of climate or scarcity, but because they belonged to the bears. Whole regions could have been written off in our minds as death zones, territories where survival was impossible, where fire would not save us, where even numbers could not stand against the weight of one towering giant. The land was theirs, and we learned to skirt its edges, moving quietly, never lingering. But what made Arctodus so terrifying was not only its size, it was its speed. Studies of its limb proportions suggest it could run faster than any living bear, perhaps 30 miles an hour or more. Unlike saber-tooths, which relied on ambush, or hyenas, which relied on packs, the short-faced bear needed no strategy beyond its own body. It was pursuit embodied, a predator that could simply choose its victim and then take them. For humans, there was no counter, no equal footing, only avoidance. And yet, bones tell us something more. Many sites reveal Arctodus feeding not only on its kills but on scavenged remains. Its sheer dominance allowed it to displace other predators, forcing them from carcasses with nothing more than its presence. Imagine a pride of saber-tooths crouched over a fallen bison, muscles tensed, when the bear approached. The cats would scatter, abandoning their meal. The bear would claim it, feeding at leisure. In this sense, Arctodus was not just predator, but overlord, a tyrant whose hunger bent the entire ecosystem around its will. Humans, caught in this orbit, were doubly cursed. Not only could the bear kill us with ease, it could also starve us by driving us from our food. Much like the hyenas of Eurasia, the short-faced bear was a thief, but of an even higher order. It did not need numbers. It did not need cunning. Its sheer size and speed were enough to erase all resistance. Hunger followed in its shadow. Speculation allows us to imagine how such encounters shaped our instincts. Perhaps the reason we still fear vast, open spaces, the uncanny feeling of being exposed, comes from these plains. The short-faced bear did not wait in shadows. It came in the open, unstoppable. To be watched across a grassland, to see a form too large to comprehend, moving steadily toward you, may have been one of the primal terrors of our species. We still flinch at sudden movement across wide fields, at shapes appearing on the horizon. The fear lingers, though the beast is gone. And what of our stories? Did the memory of Arctodus echo in legends of giants, in myths of unstoppable beasts, larger than life, who could only be avoided, never slain? Across cultures, we find tales of monstrous beings who owned the land, who ruled over valleys or mountains where humans could not tread. Perhaps these are the whispers of the short-faced bear's dominion, carried forward through time until their true shape was forgotten. But there is another possibility, darker still. Perhaps Arctodus did more than haunt our ancestors. Perhaps it shaped our hunger for weapons. To face lions or hyenas required bravery. Yes, but to even imagine facing the short-faced bear required something greater, the dream of a tool that could equal its power. Did our ancestors look at this beast and realize that only technology could bridge the gap? That no stone in the hand, no fire in the cave, would ever be enough? Perhaps the bear, in its terrifying inevitability, was the silent spark that pushed us toward the invention of stronger weapons, sharper tools, strategies beyond instinct. And yet, in all the records we have, one truth remains. No human ever stood against a short-faced bear alone. Where it walked, we retreated. Where it fed, we starved. Where it ruled, we remembered. And though it has long vanished from the earth, the shadow it cast still stretches across us. For in the reign of the short-faced bear, humanity was reminded of its fragility. Against such power, survival was not conquest, but endurance. And in enduring, we carried forward the lessons of humility, caution, and the eternal search for a way to stand against the giants who once ruled over us. There are places on this earth that humans once feared too deeply to enter. Valleys rich with rivers, plains where herds roamed thick as clouds, groves where food grew in abundance. On any map of survival, they should have been havens, yet for early humans, they were forbidden. Not by myth, not by superstition, but by flesh. They were ruled by the short-faced bear. Imagine the mind of a clan leader guiding a band of weary travelers across the frozen grasslands. Ahead lies a fertile plain, alive with bison, elk, and mammoth. The land promises meat, marrow, hides, and fat survival through the long winter. But the elders whisper of giants who rule there, creatures taller than men, faster than horses, unstoppable in their pursuit. And so the group turns away, not because they cannot see the bounty, but because they can already feel the shadow of the bear upon it. Speculation suggests that entire migration routes may have been carved around the territories of these predators. The very geography of human expansion in the Americas could have been shaped not by climate or resources alone, but by avoidance. For to enter a region claimed by Arctodus Simus was to gamble with extinction. Better to walk farther, hungrier, into harsher lands, than to court the inevitability of the bear. The fossil record strengthens this possibility. In areas rich with Arctodus remains, human evidence is sparse. Few stone tools, few hearths, few signs of occupation. It is as though the land itself carried a warning. This place is not yours. In contrast, Regions with fewer remains of the bear show heavier traces of human presence, suggesting a pattern of cautious settlement. Our ancestors were not reckless conquerors. They were cartographers of fear, mapping the world not only by rivers and mountains, but by the domains of predators too dangerous to challenge. And in this way, the short-faced bear was more than an animal. It was a force of absence. It created voids in human habitation, carved blank spaces into our maps, dictated where stories were told and where silence reigned. Its dominion was not marked by bones alone, but by the absence of us. Think of the implications. Entire generations may have grown up never seeing these beasts, yet knowing their power, the stories of them would have been enough. To a child born on the edge of their territory, the bear was not myth but geography, the reason a certain river was never crossed, the reason certain valleys were left untouched. Fear itself became a border. Perhaps this is the origin of our myths of forbidden lands. The dark forest no one enters, the cursed valley where no man returns, the mountains haunted by giants. These are not arbitrary inventions. They are memories of avoidance, cultural echoes of the places we chose not to claim because something greater already ruled them. The apex of fear was not only an individual beast, it was the landscape it commanded, reshaped by the terror of its presence. And what of the psychology this bred? To live in a world where some lands were unreachable, not because of distance but because of danger, must have instilled a deep humility. Even now, humans feel unease in untouched wilderness, places too quiet, too vast, too empty. Our instinct tells us we do not belong, that something else owns the silence. Perhaps this unease is an echo of the short-faced bear's dominion, an inherited caution that kept our ancestors alive. Speculation deepens when we consider how this predator might have influenced our earliest forms of spirituality. When humans avoided certain regions, they may not have seen the absence as weakness, but as reverence. Lands of the bear could have been seen as sacred, reserved for powers greater than ourselves. In time, this reverence may have grown into stories of gods of the wilderness, spirits of the mountains, lords of the plains. The bear was gone, but its dominion transformed into divine memory. Archaeological hints of ritual around bears seen later in cave bear cults of Europe suggest that humans gave these creatures a place of honor, even awe. Though Arctodus Simus lived far from those caves, the same reverence may have arisen in the Americas, where survival meant acknowledging the power of giants. Perhaps the short-faced bear became the first god of those plains, not worshipped with offerings, but respected with absence. Its presence demanded silence, and silence itself became devotion. But there is another, harsher layer to this story. Avoidance was not always possible. Hunger drives desperation, and desperation drives risk. There must have been moments when humans entered bear territory despite the danger, driven by need, by chance, by boldness. These stories would have ended brutally. More often than not, screams silenced beneath crushing weight, families scattered, bones left broken in the grass. Yet even such tragedies may have become lessons. To know what happened when the rules were broken reinforced the rules themselves. Fear was not only instinct, it was enforced by memory. And so, the short-faced bear ruled not just with strength, but with inevitability. It was the apex of fear, the line drawn across the land that humans could not yet cross. Where it lived, we did not. Where it fed, we starved. Where it moved, the earth itself seemed to bend away from us. The price of survival in that age was humility. We could not yet claim the earth. We could only walk the edges of the maps carved by predators, staying to the margins, moving between their empires. And perhaps this is why, when humanity finally rose to dominance, we carried with us a strange mix of triumph and memory. Triumph that we had survived. Memory that the land had once belonged to others. In this way, The short-faced bear shaped us not only by what it took, but by what it denied. It forced us to live smaller, to move cautiously, to adapt in ways that were not about conquest but about endurance. And though the beast itself has vanished, its shadow still lingers in the way we treat wilderness, in the myths of forbidden lands, in the instinct that warns us when silence grows too deep. The apex of fear is gone, but the spaces it carved remain not on the earth, but within us. South America was a world apart, a continent sealed off for millions of years, where evolution spun its own strange kingdoms. Here, predators did not roar, nor did they stalk with teeth like sabers or towers of muscle and claw. Instead, the throne belonged to birds, not the fragile winged creatures that scatter from our footsteps today, but giants. Flightless, towering, armed with beaks sharp enough to splinter bone. These were the Forus racidae, the terror birds. Standing nearly 10 feet tall, with skulls as long as a man's arm, the terror birds ruled South America for millions of years before humans ever set foot on the continent. They were apex hunters, swift and merciless, capable of chasing prey across open plains with strides that devoured the ground. Their beaks, hooked and razor-sharp, came down like axes, capable of shattering skulls and snapping spines with a single strike. In their presence, survival was a coin flip. To meet their gaze was to face instant death. For early humans migrating into South America, the encounter must have been like stepping into another world, a nightmare of scale and unfamiliarity. They had known lions, hyenas, bears, saber-tooths, but birds had been prey, not predator. To walk into a land where the balance was inverted, where feathers cloaked death itself, would have been disorienting. Imagine cresting a ridge and seeing one in the distance, its silhouette alien against the horizon. A bird taller than you, faster than you, armed with a beak that could crush your skull like an eggshell. Archaeological clues support their dominance. Fossil evidence shows Forus racidae occupied the top of the food chain across South America until around 2 million years ago, when large cats and other mammalian predators began to invade from the north during the Great American Interchange. But in the period when humans arrived, some lineages of these birds still lingered. To step into their range was to step into a kingdom already claimed, where every shadow on the plains could mean a predator running on 2 legs. Speculation suggests that the myths of monstrous birds, thunderbirds in Native American tradition, giant raptors in South American folklore may echo these encounters. Stories of birds large enough to carry off children, with eyes that gleamed like fire and wings that shook the earth, may not have been pure imagination. They may have been memory, stretched and reshaped across generations, but rooted in the lived experience of humans walking under the reign of the terror birds. The behavior of these predators only deepens the fear. Unlike cats, which strike from ambush, terror birds hunted in the open. Their long legs allowed them to sprint at speeds comparable to modern horses. Once they fixed their eyes on prey, escape was nearly impossible. And their attack was surgical, a downward strike of the beak, aimed at the head or neck, ending the hunt in seconds. For humans slower, weaker, burdened with tools and children, there was no hope of outrunning them. The only defense was fire, stone, or the desperate strength of numbers. Imagine a human band making camp on the edge of the pampas. The night is cold, the fire small. In the distance, a silhouette watches from the darkness, tall, feathered, unmoving. The fire crackles, but the bird does not flee. It waits, patient, until dawn. At first light, it advances, each step deliberate, each stride erasing the distance. Panic erupts. Stones are thrown, shouts rise, spears thrust desperately. But the bird strikes with speed beyond comprehension, its beak crashing down upon bone. The clan scatters, leaving behind the fallen. For the terror bird, there is no need for stealth. Its presence alone is enough to break human resolve. Speculation invites us to wonder, did terror birds shape the way humans perceived birds in general? Even now, birds occupy a strange space in our imagination. They are symbols of freedom, but also omens of death. Ravens, vultures, owls, creatures associated with the end, with darkness, with haunting presences that linger near the dying. Could these associations be remnants of an age when birds were not harmless companions of the sky, but killers who walked the earth beside us? The ecological power of the terror birds was immense. They filled the niche of top predator for millions of years, driving smaller mammals into perpetual flight. For humans, arriving late to this world, survival meant navigating a hierarchy already written. Every step into South America was taken under their gaze, every meal hunted in competition with them, every fire lit in defiance of their watch. Unlike lions or bears, they offered no familiar reference point. Their alien form, their speed, their alien shrieks must have seemed otherworldly, giving rise to stories of creatures that were not beasts, but spirits, demons, harbingers of doom. And yet, as with all predators, their reign was not eternal. Competition with big cats and other mammalian hunters, coupled with changing climates, brought their numbers down. But the memory of them would not have faded quickly. To the humans who lived during their last reign, the terror birds were not myth, they were reality. Their shadows fell across the plains, their cries pierced the silence, their beaks left cracks in bone that archaeologists still uncover today. Speculation extends further. Perhaps the first stories of gods of the sky, of bird-headed spirits, of divine messengers, were not born from imagination, but from encounters with these creatures. To stand beneath a predator taller than you, feathered like the sky, crowned with a beak that could kill with one strike. Is it any wonder that humans began to see divinity in birds? To fear them was natural. To revere them was inevitable. And so, in South America, the terror birds reigned as monarchs of fear. For humans, their presence meant that every step into this continent was taken on borrowed time, every fire lit under the weight of watching eyes, every breath measured against the possibility of a sudden strike. No land was ours yet. It belonged to the giants of feather and bone, who reminded us that survival was never guaranteed, and that in their world, we walked as intruders. Every step our ancestors took into new lands carried the weight of the unknown. To migrate was not to wander freely, but to gamble with fate, for each horizon crossed brought them into another kingdom already ruled by monsters. It was as if the earth itself had been divided into realms, each guarded by a different terror, each demanding that humanity prove its will to endure before moving further. From Africa into Eurasia, from Eurasia into the Americas, from the grasslands into frozen tundra, migration was not only a journey across geography, but across empires of predators. Lions, saber-tooths, hyenas, bears, terror birds, each land came with its own rulers. For humans, survival meant walking into their courts as trespassers, uninvited, unwanted, and unprepared. Imagine what it must have felt like to stand on the edge of a new continent. Before you lies a land of promise, rivers gleaming like veins of silver, herds stretching to the horizon, forests thick with fruit and shelter. But beneath the beauty lurks silence, a silence broken by cries that are not your own. Each step forward is taken with the knowledge that something is already watching, something that has ruled long before you and will not yield without blood. Speculation suggests that our very instinct for awe at new landscapes may be bound to this fear. Even now, when we look upon mountains or oceans, we feel both wonder and unease. Perhaps this duality comes from the fact that, for our ancestors, new lands were never empty canvases. They were filled with dangers waiting just beyond sight. To stand at the edge of the world was to feel both the pull of opportunity and the weight of terror. archaeological traces confirm that migration often came at immense cost. Populations dwindled, groups splintered, families vanished. Genetic bottlenecks show that entire waves of movement were nearly erased, leaving only a few survivors to carry forward. Each expansion was not a march of triumph, but a bleeding struggle, where survival was bought at the price of countless lives. Behind every success lay bones buried in silence, victims of monsters who would never be named. And yet, humanity continued. Again and again, our species chose to step into these new kingdoms. Hunger drove them, yes, but perhaps something deeper too, a compulsion to move forward, to test the boundaries of what was survivable. What if this very trait, this restless push beyond the safe and the known, was forged by monsters themselves? To live under their gaze was to understand that safety was temporary, that to remain in one place was to eventually be consumed. Movement became not just strategy, but necessity. Speculation invites us to imagine how each predator left its mark on migration myths. To cross a mountain range might have been to pass through the land of lions. To ford a river might have meant entering the territory of hyenas. To step onto a plain might have carried the warning, "This is where the giants walk." Such divisions were not written on maps but carved into memory, passed from elder to child as living geography. Fear itself charted the course of humanity across the globe. Consider the journey into the Americas. Across the Bering Land Bridge, families carried fire, tools, and stories into a land no human had seen before. But they did not enter an empty world. Saber-tooths stalked the valleys, dire wolves roamed the plains, short-faced bears towered over all. And further south, terror birds still reigned in pockets of wilderness. To move forward was to enter one nightmare after another. Every migration brought not safety, but fresh danger. And yet, there is beauty in this truth. For it was precisely in these crucibles of fear that humanity discovered its resilience. Each new monster forced us to adapt, to invent, to cooperate more deeply than before. Spears sharpened further, fires tended longer, shelters built stronger. The predators were not only threats, they were teachers, shaping us in ways we could never have imagined. Without them, perhaps our migrations would have stalled, our ingenuity never awakened. Think of the instinct you feel when entering an unfamiliar place even today. The pause at the threshold of a dark forest, the chill of standing on a cliff's edge overlooking a vast sea. That hesitation may not be mere caution. It may be memory, the echo of ancestors who stood at the edge of the world, weighing the promise of survival against the certainty of monsters. Perhaps this is why myths of edges and thresholds permeate human culture. Stories of forbidden lands, of shadowy realms, of worlds beyond our own. These may not simply be metaphors for spiritual journeys. They may be reflections of real experiences, the countless moments when humans stood before new landscapes knowing they were not the first to stand there. They were intruders in kingdoms of beasts, forced to choose whether to turn back or to walk forward into the jaws of danger. And always, they walked forward. So it was that every migration became a crucible. Humanity did not spread across the earth because the world was empty and waiting. We spread because we were willing to step into places where survival seemed impossible, into lands where monsters had ruled unchallenged for millennia. Each fire lit on new soil was a declaration, fragile, trembling, but unbroken, that we would endure, even in kingdoms not meant for us. The edge of the world was never a place. It was a state of being, a cliff between what we knew and what we feared. And time after time, we stepped off that cliff and walked into the dark. The earth remembers. Beneath the soil, in caves and riverbeds, in the sediments of long-vanished lakes, the story of our fragility is written not in words but in scars. Human bones, gnawed and broken, tell of a time when we were not the hunters of legend, but the hunted of reality. Archaeology has unearthed the testimony of predators, etched directly into our ancestors' remains. At Swartkrans Cave in South Africa, for instance, researchers uncovered skulls of early hominins punctured by the unmistakable fangs of leopards. The holes match perfectly with the spacing of feline canines, suggesting that these humans were dragged into trees, consumed like any antelope or baboon. Elsewhere, in Europe, hyena dens yield human bones scattered among the remains of bison and horses, bearing the crushing marks of jaws that splintered femora and cracked skulls for marrow. In these caves, there is no sign of victory, only fragments of families devoured in the dark. Consider the scene one of those skeletons might represent. A small band gathers near the mouth of a limestone cave, children playing near the fire. The night grows late, and fatigue sets in. Somewhere beyond the glow, unseen eyes fix upon them. The predator waits until silence falls, until the fire dims, until a child wanders too far from safety. In a heartbeat, the peace shatters. A scream, a rush of movement, claws tearing flesh, panic scatters the group. In the morning, the survivors return to silence and absence, with only blood on the ground and tracks leading into the dark. The bones discovered millennia later are all that remains of that moment. These are not isolated incidents. Across continents, tooth-marked bones reveal a grim pattern. Humanity was on the menu. At Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, fossilized hominin bones show evidence of predation by large cats, with scratches and punctures marking the skulls. In Spain, cave sites reveal humans consumed by lions, their remains mingled with prey animals. Even Neanderthals, robust, powerful, skilled hunters, were not exempt. In sites across Europe, their bones bear signs of predator attack, suggesting that even our close cousins lived under the same shadow. Entire families may have vanished in sudden attacks. A clan cornered by a pack of hyenas. A mother and child dragged into the grass by a saber-tooth. Hunters returning from the plains to find their camp empty, fire extinguished, only bones left behind. These were not rare catastrophes. They were rhythms of life, reminders that the line between existence and extinction was paper-thin. Speculation allows us to trace how these encounters shaped human psychology. Our deep instinct to fear the dark may be the echo of countless nights when absence meant death. Our caution around caves may be the memory of dens filled with bones. Even the primal scream, the way fear rips from us in sound, may be an ancient defense, honed to startle predators long enough to allow escape. The very architecture of our fear was written by teeth. Archaeology strengthens this vision with cold detail. Cut marks layered over predator, gnawing reveal contests over carcasses, sometimes humans scavenging from lions, sometimes lions feeding on humans. In the record, there is no clear line of dominance, only a cycle of survival where we were both thief and victim. And again, the bones speak. Cracked skulls, splintered limbs, vertebrae bearing signs of crushing force. Our ancestors were not lords of the land. They were prey, their deaths preserved as evidence in stone. And yet, these bones are not only stories of loss, they are stories of survival. For each family erased, another endured. For every camp destroyed, another rebuilt. The fact that we can look upon these fossils at all is proof that humanity did not vanish, even when the world seemed determined to erase us. We are the descendants of those who escaped the jaws, who ran fast enough, who hid deep enough, who lit the fire before the predators arrived. Speculation stretches further. Perhaps entire traditions of burial, ritual, and mourning began not with natural death, but with predator attacks. To find the mangled remains of kin would have been a moment of horror, but also a moment of reckoning. The dead could not be left exposed, lest scavengers return. So we buried, we mourned, we remembered. In this way, the violence of predators may have sparked the earliest rituals of care, shaping culture as much as fear. And consider this: the predators did not distinguish us from other prey. To them, we were no different than deer or antelope, one more body to be consumed. Yet to us, each loss carried weight beyond the body. Each death was story, grief, lesson. Perhaps this is where humanity's separation truly began, not in strength, but in meaning. Predators killed. We remembered. And remembrance itself became a weapon, for it allowed us to adapt, to anticipate, to pass knowledge forward. Even now, when archaeologists lift bones from the earth and see the marks of teeth, we feel the echo of those ancient nights. The fear is not abstract. It is visceral, a reminder that our lineage was not built on conquest alone, but on survival through terror. We did not rise because we were untouchable. We rose because we endured when the odds demanded we should fall. The bones of the hunted are silent, but in their silence they tell us something profound, that humanity was never destined to rule. We became what we are not in spite of being prey, but because of it. The predators carved their lessons into us, lesson by lesson, tooth by tooth, and through them, we learned the price of life. Fear is not only an emotion, it is inheritance. It runs through us as surely as blood, carried in the architecture of our nervous systems, whispered by instincts that act faster than thought. Long before cities rose, long before fire spread from hearths into furnaces and forges, our ancestors were hunted, and the memory of those hunts remains in us, not in stories alone, but in our very bodies. Consider the startle reflex. A sudden movement at the edge of vision, a noise in the silence, a flash of eyeshine in the dark before reason can intervene. Our muscles tighten, our breath halts, our heart races. This is not learned. It is built into us. It is the echo of nights when to hesitate was to die. Saber-tooths in the grass, lions in the cave mouth, hyenas circling the fire. The body remembers what the mind may have forgotten. Archaeology shows us the bones of the hunted, but genetics shows us their legacy. Studies of human stress responses reveal deep evolutionary roots. Cortisol, adrenaline, the surge of energy that sharpens our senses and floods our muscles. These are not modern inconveniences. They are survival tools, carved by millennia of predation. Fear was not weakness. Fear was adaptation. Without it, our lineage would not have endured. Speculation invites us to see our phobias not as irrational quirks, but as memories written in code. The fear of the dark, universal across cultures, may not be about absence of light, but about presence of predators. Darkness is when the lions moved, when eyes glowed from the tree line, when screams tore through the silence. The fear of snakes and spiders, creatures that killed with stealth and venom, may reflect dangers encountered countless times in prehistory. Even our fear of heights may stem from a time when safety meant clinging to branches, when a fall meant becoming prey. And what of nightmares? The recurring dream of being chased, of running without escape, of teeth closing in from behind. Could these be echoes too? Perhaps our minds replay the primal conditions of survival, reminding us of the dangers that shaped us. The dream is not random. It is memory carried forward, a rehearsal of what once kept us alive. The body bears other marks as well. Look at the whites of our eyes. Unlike most primates, humans have highly visible sclera, allowing us to track each other's gaze. Why? Some scientists suggest it was a social adaptation for cooperation, but perhaps it was also born of fear. To survive as prey meant watching one another closely, reading danger in the eyes of the group, responding instantly to shifts in attention. A glance was warning, a widening of eyes meant run. Our very faces became canvases for survival signals, painted by the experience of being hunted. Speculation extends further. Could our very intelligence, our ability to plan, to imagine, to anticipate, be rooted in fear? To be prey is to live in uncertainty, to constantly weigh risk against reward. Every step into the grass, every choice of shelter, every approach to a carcass demanded foresight. Those who could imagine danger where none was visible, who could anticipate the strike before it came, survived. In this sense, our minds may be the greatest gift predators ever gave us. They forced us to think beyond the moment, to carry fear into the future, to invent strategy from anxiety. Even culture may carry this inheritance. Myths of monsters in the dark, demons with fangs, spirits that stalk the night. These are not arbitrary. They are cultural fossils, memories passed down through story, the way genes carry memory through flesh. When a child fears the dark today, they are not simply imagining. They are echoing a lineage of children who cried in the night because something waited just beyond the fire. But fear, while shaping us, also limited us. There were valleys never entered, caves never explored, rivers never crossed, because the risk outweighed the reward. These absences shaped human history as much as our triumphs. Even now, our caution persists. We design lights for every street, fences for every yard, alarms for every door. We are still building fire against the night. The monsters may be gone, but the prey within us has not vanished. Speculation allows us to wonder, what if our anxiety, so prevalent in the modern world, is not a disorder but an echo, a system once tuned to survival, now misfiring in a world where the predators are no longer real. The panic in the chest, the sleeplessness at night, the unease in silence. Perhaps these are the ghosts of predators past, their presence still shaping us long after their extinction. And yet, there is beauty in this inheritance. Fear gave us caution, but it also gave us story, ritual, cooperation. It taught us to watch, to listen, to anticipate. It taught us humility in the face of forces larger than ourselves. It reminded us that survival is not dominance, but adaptation. The prey still lives inside us, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Imagine yourself now, walking through a quiet forest. The leaves rustle, the air stills, and a shape seems to move at the edge of vision. Your heart quickens, your breath catches, your skin prickles. You tell yourself there is nothing there, and yet the body does not believe. It remembers. It has always remembered. And in that memory lies the truth of what we are. Not only hunters, not only rulers, but descendants of the hunted, carrying their fear forward as our inheritance. Fear may have written itself into our bodies, but terror alone does not sustain survival. At some point, our ancestors began to answer it, not with flight, not only with fire, but with invention. The age of monsters forced humanity into its first true arms race. Against teeth and claw, we had nothing but stone, wood, and flame. Yet in those humble materials, pressed by desperation, we found the beginnings of technology itself. The earliest stone tools, sharp flakes struck from river cobbles, were not weapons of conquest. They were scavengers' tools, used to carve flesh from the bones left behind by lions and hyenas. Yet even here was the seed of defiance. To wield stone was to take part in the struggle for meat, to risk lingering near the kill sites of predators, to claim a share of what was never meant for us. Each shard of flint, each flake of obsidian, was more than a tool. It was a declaration that we would not starve quietly. Archaeological sites like Olduvai Gorge tell this story clearly. There, cut marks from human tools lie over predator tooth marks, proof that our ancestors were latecomers to the feast. But over time, the marks begin to change. Spears appear, sharpened points attached to wood, weapons not for scavenging but for striking. By the time of Homo heidelbergensis and later Neanderthals, spears were thrust with deadly force into the hides of mammoths and rhinoceros. Humans were no longer waiting for predators to finish. They were entering the hunt themselves. Yet this leap was not born of ambition, it was born of necessity. Imagine the endless nights of hunger, the sound of children crying around dying fires, the despair of watching food stolen again and again by hyenas or claimed by bears. Terror pushed the mind toward solutions. A sharper edge meant more meat cut before the thieves arrived. A longer spear meant a chance to stand ground instead of scatter. Fire kept the dark at bay, but tools gave courage to step beyond the firelight. Speculation suggests that each new predator inspired its own arms. Hyenas may have taught us the value of stones to throw, scattering their packs with sudden volleys. Saber-tooths may have demanded longer spears, giving distance between fragile flesh and daggered teeth. The short-faced bear may have driven dreams of weapons sharper and stronger than stone, seeds that would one day become metal. In this way, our arsenal grew not from conquest, but from terror. Monsters forced our hands. Consider the Acheulean hand axe, shaped with deliberate symmetry over 1,000,000 years ago. Its form is elegant, its edge sharp, its purpose debated. To archaeologists, it is one of the first signs of abstract thought, of planned design, but in the context of fear, it may also have been a shield, a way to butcher faster, to defend more desperately, to carve survival from the jaws of danger. Each strike of stone against stone was an act of invention under duress, a sound of defiance against predators watching from the grass. The arms race was not only physical. Fire itself was refined, controlled, carried across landscapes. Archaeological evidence at Wonderwork Cave shows controlled fire nearly 1,000,000 years ago, its soot stains marking the walls like shadows of ancient hearths. Fire became portable, embers wrapped in bark and carried on migrations. It was the first tool that did not need to be remade each time, but preserved a weapon and a symbol of continuity. To lose it was to risk death. To keep it was to carry the only true power humanity had against the dark. Speculation deepens when we consider how fear shaped cooperation. A lone spear, a lone fire, was nothing. But together, sharpened stakes formed walls. Together, many fires lit a field. Together, the human voice became a weapon, shouts echoing into the night, startling predators long enough to hold them back. The arms race was not individual, it was communal. Every invention was magnified by numbers, by hands working side by side, by minds thinking not for themselves but for the group. And so technology did not emerge from curiosity alone. It emerged from the crucible of fear. The pressure of predators carved the first blades, the first hearths, the first strategies of war. We often speak of invention as triumph, as ingenuity born from boldness. But here, at the dawn of technology, invention was survival. It was the hunted becoming, step by step, the hunters. Imagine a night on the African plain. The fire burns low, hyenas circle, eyes glinting in the dark. But this time, the clan does not retreat. Spears are planted upright, forming a hedge of points. Stones are stacked within reach. The children are gathered at the center. The fire is fed, its smoke curling into the night. And when the hyenas approach, the humans rise together, voices raised, weapons ready. The predators hesitate. Just for a moment, the balance shifts. Speculation invites us to ask, without the monsters, would we ever have invented? Without their fangs, would we have sharpened stone? Without their shadows, would we have preserved fire? Without their theft, would we have learned to guard, to strategize, to plan for tomorrow? Perhaps the entire trajectory of human progress from blades of flint to cities of steel began here, in the arms race forced upon us by the predators of the Ice Age. The arms race was not about dominance. Not yet. It was about survival. To invent was to buy another night, another chance, another fragile foothold in a world not made for us. Terror pressed us forward. Fear shaped our hands. And in that shaping, humanity began to become something more than prey. There must have been a moment not recorded, not remembered, but felt in the marrow of humanity when the balance shifted. A night when the circle of fire did not merely hold the predators at bay, but turned against them. A day when the spear did not only wound, but killed. A moment when fear was still present, but no longer paralyzing. For the first time, the hunted struck back. Imagine the scene. A clan stalks the edge of a grassland where lions have denned for generations. The pride has taken children before, dragged hunters from carcasses, stolen food time and again. But this time the humans do not retreat. They come armed with firebrands, with spears hardened in flame, with stones sharpened to edges never seen before. They circle the cave mouth, flames casting shadows on the stone. The lions roar, but the humans do not scatter. They advance. The first predator killers are born. Archaeological evidence hints at this transformation. Fossils of large carnivores show cut marks, the unmistakable traces of butchery. Cave lions, saber-toothed cats, even giant hyenas appear in contexts where humans were not only victims but aggressors. Spears embedded in predator bones, skulls shattered by blows, dens disturbed and emptied. In Europe, the remains of cave lions bear signs of deliberate hunting, their skins perhaps worn as symbols of defiance, proof that the rulers of the caves could be overthrown. Speculation suggests that these victories were more than practical. They were spiritual. To kill a predator was to reverse the ancient script, to turn fear into triumph, prey into hunter. Imagine the power of wearing a lion's pelt after generations of fleeing from its roar. Imagine the pride of carrying a saber-tooth fang, not as a relic of terror, but as a trophy of conquest. These moments must have electrified the imagination, reshaping not only survival but identity. Yet these victories were not easy. Every hunt was a gamble. To face a predator was to risk annihilation. One misstep, one failed strike, and the balance returned to its ancient state. But slowly, steadily, humans learned. Spears became more effective, tipped with stone points designed to pierce hide and bone. Cooperation grew sharper, movements more coordinated, strategies more complex. No longer did we only scatter when danger approached. Now we gathered, planned, and struck first. Consider the Neanderthals. Archaeological sites reveal their skill in coordinated hunting, their ability to take down even the most dangerous prey. They were not timid scavengers. They confronted lions, cave bears, and hyenas, sometimes at terrible cost, but sometimes with victory. Their bones bear scars of conflict, injuries from claws and teeth, but their tools tell another story, one of defiance, of predators no longer unchallenged. Speculation allows us to imagine how these first kills transformed human culture. The story of a predator slain would not have been forgotten. Around the fire, it would have been retold again and again, a myth of courage, a tale of survival made into legend. The killers of monsters became heroes, their deeds remembered long after their bones turned to dust. Perhaps the first epics were not about rival tribes or mighty hunters of game, but about those who faced the beasts and returned alive. And with each story, fear shifted. Predators were no longer gods, untouchable rulers of the night. They became foes, dangerous, yes, but not invincible. The fire no longer symbolized only defense. It became a beacon of possibility, the light of those who dared to strike back. But here lies the paradox. In killing predators, humanity began to unravel the very balance that had shaped it. For countless generations, fear had honed us, kept us alert, forced us to adapt. Now, with every lion slain, with every bear driven from its den, we chipped away at the world that had forged us. The arms race was entering a new stage, no longer survival against overwhelming odds, but the first steps toward dominance. Speculation deepens when we consider how the psychological shift of these kills may have altered our trajectory. To go from hunted to hunter is to change the lens through which the world is seen. No longer did every shadow mean danger. Now it could mean opportunity. No longer was the roar only warning, it could be challenge. The first predator killers may have been the first to see themselves not merely as survivors, but as agents shaping the land around them. And yet, the prey still lived inside. Every kill carried risk. Every victory was bought with blood. The hunters knew that the line was thin, that arrogance could undo them. In this tension, fear sharpened by triumph, humanity's future was written. We did not abandon caution, but we no longer lived only by it. We began to balance terror with ambition, survival with strategy. Imagine the moment after such a kill. The predator lies still, its bulk heavy in the grass. The humans stand around it, breathing hard, spears slick with blood, eyes wide with disbelief. Silence falls, broken only by the crackle of fire. Then, slowly, realization spreads. The monster is dead. The roar will not come again. Fear gives way to awe, awe to pride, pride to story. And story becomes memory, carried into generations unborn. These were the moments that turned the tide. The hunted slowly became the hunters, not because fear vanished, but because fear was met with courage. Terror still pressed upon us, but we pressed back, and in that exchange, the world began to change. The predators had shaped us. Now, for the first time, we were beginning to shape them. Once the first predator killers rose, the earth began to shift in ways no beast could have foreseen. Humanity spread outward, fire and weapons carried with every migration. Stories of conquest passed down like heirlooms. And with each new land, with each new encounter, predators that had reigned for millions of years began to vanish. The cave lions of Europe, once the masters of stone chambers and icy plains, dwindled as humans spread across their range. Saber-toothed cats, icons of power and terror, began to fade from fossil records soon after human arrival in new territories. The hyena kings, the terror birds, even the colossal short-faced bear, one by one, the monsters that had defined the age disappeared. Coincidence? Climate change was real, reshaping ecosystems as glaciers advanced and retreated. Prey species shifted, landscapes transformed, but the timing is difficult to ignore. Again and again, the great predators fall in the wake of human expansion, as though our very presence carried a shadow that no rival could withstand. The wars may not have been swift battles, but long campaigns fought across millennia, fire and spear against tooth and claw, persistence against power. Speculation suggests that extermination was not always deliberate. Humans may not have set out to destroy, but to survive. Each predator slain was one less threat to the clan. Each den cleared was one more shelter claimed. Each carcass defended was one more meal secured. Yet survival, multiplied across centuries, becomes erasure. The balance tipped. For the first time in Earth's history, the prey began to outlast the predator. Imagine the silence that followed. A valley once filled with the roars of lions, now only the sound of wind. A grassland once watched by saber-tooths, now empty of their shadows. The night grew quieter, less dangerous, but also less alive. Humanity had survived, but survival came at a cost. The predator wars were not a single story, but 1,000, unfolding across continents. Spears thrust into cave lions in Europe, fires driven against hyenas in Asia, arrows loosed at terror birds in South America. Each victory small, each loss forgotten, until only one species remained where once there had been many. And so the age of monsters waned, not by chance, not by storm, but by the slow, relentless march of humanity. For the first time, the balance of fear was undone. The world no longer belonged to them. It was becoming ours. The silence left in the wake of the monsters was not natural. It was not the slow fading of a cycle, nor the balanced rhythm of life and death that had shaped ecosystems for millions of years. It was abrupt, sharp, a shadow cast by our rise. Humanity's survival meant the unraveling of the very predators that had ruled us. We endured, but they did not. Consider the timeline. For 2 million years, saber-toothed cats thrived across the continents, apex hunters who had weathered climate swings and shifting prey populations. Yet within a few thousand years of widespread human presence, they vanish from the record. Cave lions, larger and stronger than the lions we know today, disappeared in the same span. The terror birds, sovereign rulers of South America, were erased soon after humans crossed into their domain. Coincidence seems fragile against such patterns. Speculation suggests that extinction was not always through direct killing, but through pressure. We stole their prey with more efficient hunts, leaving less for them. We took their shelters, lighting fires in caves once theirs. We carried fire and tools into the night, pushing predators back step by step. And when hunger made conflict inevitable, we did not always lose. Each predator killed may have felt like survival in the moment, but multiplied across centuries, it became annihilation. Imagine a world seen through their eyes. A lion returns to its den to find it filled with smoke and human voices. A saber-tooth prowls the plains only to see its prey driven into traps, the carcass claimed before it can strike. A hyena pack circles the fire, only to be met with stones, spears, and cries that drive them back. To them, humanity must have seemed less like prey and more like a spreading force of disruption, small, fragile, but endless. And so the monsters fell, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 cuts. Hunger eroded their strength. Fire eroded their territories. Spears eroded their dominance. In the end, it was not only their bodies that were broken, but their place in the world. Where once they had ruled, they became shadows in memory. Yet in this victory lies a paradox. We survived because they fell, but in their absence, something was lost. The very predators that shaped our instincts, sharpened our senses, and forged our tools were gone. The world became quieter, less dangerous, but also less wild. Humanity inherited the earth not only by triumph, but by emptiness. Speculation stretches further. Perhaps we carry guilt older than memory. Myths of great beasts slain by heroes, of dragons defeated, of monsters banished. Could these be echoes of the real extinctions we caused? Stories told not only in pride, but in unease, as if some part of us knew that survival had come at their expense. The shadow of extinction was not only cast upon them, it was cast upon us too, shaping our stories, our fears, our reverence for creatures no longer here. For in the end, we did not simply survive among monsters, we survived by destroying them. Every flame that drove them from a cave, every spear that pierced their hide, every hunt that took their prey, was a step toward their end. We became the rulers of a quieter earth, but our throne was built on the bones of those who had once ruled us. Long after the monsters themselves vanished, their shadows walked beside us in story. Across continents, across languages, across generations, humanity filled its folklore with dragons, demons, and beasts, echoes of predators that once ruled the earth. Though their bones lay buried, they survived in memory, preserved not in flesh but in legend. Consider the dragon, coiled in caves or lurking in mountains, breathing fire, hoarding death. To modern eyes it is fantasy, yet its shape is suspiciously familiar. The cave lion's reign in Europe, the saber-tooth's daggered strike, the short-faced bear's dominance of valleys all left imprints too deep to erase. The dragon may not be a single creature remembered, but a composite, a nightmare stitched together from all the predators that once pressed us down. Its scales, its claws, its fire, These are metaphors for a reality when caves truly were lairs of monsters, and fire our only defense. Across Africa, stories speak of shape-shifting beasts, half human, half hyena, echoes of the laughter that haunted the night for early clans. In South America, myths of giant birds who carried children away may recall the terror birds, their hooked beaks crashing down like axes. In Arctic traditions, tales of monstrous bears, larger than houses, remind us of Arctodus simus, a beast that once ruled with inevitability. The stories differ, but the theme is constant. There were places we could not walk, creatures we could not face, forces greater than us. Archaeology offers tantalizing clues. Carvings of lions on Paleolithic cave walls, etched in flickering firelight, are not simply art. They are warnings, memories, perhaps even rituals of respect. The predators had been killed, yes, but their spirits lingered. To paint them was to remember them, to preserve their power in line and pigment. In this sense, art itself may be another form of myth, a way to keep alive the presence of monsters long gone. Speculation suggests that myths served more than memory. They were survival strategies encoded in story. A tale of a dragon guarding a cave may have been a way to warn children of real lions that once dwelled in stone chambers. A legend of a demon bird may have reminded families never to wander too far into open plains. The creatures in myth are distorted, yes, but their lessons are precise. Beware the dark, beware the lair, beware the silence before the strike. And even today, the echo endures. Our horror films are filled with creatures of tooth and claw, eyes gleaming in the dark, shadows lurking at the edge of firelight. They may be dressed in scales or wings, but the fear they stir is ancient. It is the same fear that once made us huddle together at night, clutching spears, listening for laughter in the grass. In this way, myths are not relics. They are living fossils of fear passed down through imagination. For though the monsters are gone, we never truly let them go. We carried them into our stories, and in those stories, they still rule. Legends preserve what bones alone could not, the memory of a world where we were not rulers, but prey. By 10,000 years ago, the age of monsters had ended. The cave lions were gone, their shadows lingering only in ochre paintings. The saber-tooths, whose jaws once split bone like twigs, had fallen silent. The hyena kings no longer haunted the mouths of caves. The short-faced bear, towering, relentless, inevitable, had vanished from the plains. The terror birds, those feathered giants with axe-like beaks, were erased from the world they once ruled. And with their disappearance, a balance was struck, not the balance of nature, but of dominance. For the first time in history, humans stood unchallenged. No predator prowled above us in the hierarchy. No roar or shriek carried the certainty of our doom. A world of prey, a world in which our ancestors had cowered in shadows and fires, had become a world of hunters. The final balance had tipped, and it tipped in our favor. Archaeology records the turning point in silence. Where once fossil layers teem with predator remains, the strata of the Holocene grow quiet. The megafauna are gone, and in their place, signs of humanity spread: stone blades scattered across landscapes, charcoal from controlled fires, bones of prey animals butchered with precision. The old empires of the beasts dissolved into absence, while the presence of humans multiplied like flame across dry grass. But this balance was not victory in the heroic sense. It was the culmination of a long, brutal apprenticeship in survival. For millions of years, predators had honed us, tested us, pressed us into corners where only invention and cooperation could save us. They gave us fire, strategy, story, weaponry. They shaped our bodies, our minds, our instincts. And when finally we rose above them, it was not as innocent heirs. It was as survivors forged in fear. Speculation suggests that this shift, the absence of monsters, altered us in profound ways. To live without constant predation was to live in a new world, a world where the pressure of survival no longer defined every moment. Freed from the daily terror of claws and fangs, our ancestors turned their energy toward other battles, against hunger, against each other, against the unknown forces of nature. The rise of agriculture, settlement, and civilization itself may have been possible only because the monsters were gone. Without their shadow, humans had space to imagine more than the next night's survival. Yet the balance was fragile, for even as predators disappeared, their memory lingered. The prey within us did not vanish, it adapted. Our instincts remained sharpened, our fears still whispering. The world outside had changed, but the world inside still carried scars. We were rulers now, yes, but rulers haunted by the lessons of those we had replaced. Imagine standing on a plain in this new age. Herds of animals graze, unguarded by lions. No saber-tooth waits in the grass, no hyenas circle at the edge of firelight. The silence is unsettling. A landscape once alive with danger feels emptied, hollowed of something essential. Humans gather around fire, not as trembling prey, but as confident hunters. And yet the firelight still feels necessary. The fear has not left, even if its objects have. The balance may have shifted, but its shadow remains. Speculation deepens when we ask, was this truly balance, or the beginning of imbalance? The predators who once checked us were gone, leaving us alone at the top. With no rival, our population surged. With no natural curb, our hunger spread across the land. The final balance may not have been equilibrium at all, but the start of a dominance that the earth had never known before. And here lies the paradox of our rise. We were made by monsters, yet their absence unmade the world that created us. The end of their reign was also the end of the crucible that had forged our resilience. From that moment onward, our challenges would be of our own making, born not from external predators but from within ourselves. Still, in that fragile dawn of the Holocene, it must have felt like triumph. After millions of years as prey, humanity could at last walk without constant fear. The final balance was reached. The hunted had become the hunters, and the monsters who once ruled us were reduced to legend. In the Ice Age, we were never alone. Every step through the grass carried the chance of being watched. Every cave mouth might hold eyes that had claimed it before us. Every fire was not a luxury, but a fragile shield against the jaws pressing in from the dark. We walked in a world of giants, lions larger than any alive today, cats with sabers for teeth, hyenas that ruled in packs, bears that stood like towers, birds that killed with beaks like hammers. To them, we were nothing but fragile flesh, slow-footed and soft-skinned, one more animal in the endless cycle of hunger. And yet, we endured, not because we were stronger, nor faster, nor more fearless, but because terror pushed us further than instinct. Fear carved into us caution, imagination, story. Loss taught us cooperation. Hunger taught us invention. We became who we are not in spite of monsters, but because of them. But the question lingers. Was our survival inevitable? Or was it only by chance the right spark of fire, the right edge of stone, the right tribe that refused to scatter? Did we outlast the beasts because we were destined to rise, or because they forced us into the crucible of fear, shaping us into something new? Perhaps our dominance was never earned, but given, forged in the shadow of their power and in the silence that followed their fall. Picture it, a lone tribe huddled around a fire, the night pressing in close. Beyond the glow, the grass moves. Eyes gleam yellow, patient, unblinking. The fire crackles, sparks rise, voices whisper in fear. They do not know what waits. They do not know if dawn will come. What they cannot see is that in this moment, this fragile circle of warmth in a sea of monsters lies the seed of everything to come. Cities, stories, empires, futures. For this was the crucible, the place where prey began the long road to becoming rulers of the earth.